The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret, the kind that clings to your skin and won't let go. Elliot Harper, barely 19, lay bruised and broken on the stiff white sheets, his left eye swollen shut, his heart shattered worse than his ribs. His older brother Caleb, the one he'd idolized since they were kids chasing fireflies in their Tennessee backyard, had done this to him. It was 2015, and the world was changing, but not fast enough for Spring Hollow, Tennessee. The town was a patchwork of pickup trucks, church steeples, and unspoken rules. Elliot had broken one of those rules. He'd come out to his family, his voice trembling but proud, expecting love or at least understanding. Instead, Caleb's fists had answered, fueled by a mix of rage, shame, and the weight of their father's rigid expectations. "You're no brother of mine," Caleb had spat, his knuckles bloody, leaving Elliot crumpled on the living room floor. Now, in the hospital, Elliot's mother wept silently by his side, her hands wringing a tissue to shreds. His father, a stoic mechanic who'd never known how to talk about feelings, stood by the window, staring out at nothing. Caleb was gone, stormed out after the fight, leaving only the echo of his betrayal. Elliot's chest ached, not just from the bruises but from the loss of the brother who'd taught him how to ride a bike, who'd shared secret dreams under the stars. How could love turn to hate so fast? Days later, Elliot left Spring Hollow. He packed a single duffel bag, bought a bus ticket with the little money he'd saved from his part-time job at the diner, and headed for Seattle. The city was a beacon of freedom, a place where he could be himself without fear. He didn't say goodbye. He couldn't. The pain was too raw, the wound too deep. As the bus rolled out of town, he pressed his forehead against the cool window, whispering a promise to himself. He'd build a life where he was enough. Seattle was a kaleidoscope of color and chaos. The city pulsed with liferine-slicked streets, coffee shops buzzing with artists, and pride flags fluttering in the breeze. Elliot found a job at a small bookstore in Capitol Hill, the heart of the city's queer community. The owner, a kind-eyed woman named Marla, saw something in Hema spark beneath the scars. She gave him a chance, and soon, the bookstore became his sanctuary. He spent his days shelving novels, recommending poetry to shy customers, and slowly piecing himself back together. It was there, among the stacks, that he met Julian Torres. Julian was a whirlwind of charisma, with dark curls that fell into his eyes and a laugh that could light up the gloomiest Seattle afternoon. He was a painter, his hands often smudged with color, his heart as open as the canvases he filled with vibrant abstracts. Their first conversation was over a dog-eared copy of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Julian had teased Elliot for reading old man poetry, and Elliot had shot back that Julian's taste in art was chaotic finger painting. They'd laughed until the store closed, and by the time they parted, Elliot felt something he hadn't in years: hope. Their love grew quietly, like a seedling breaking through concrete. Julian was patient, never pushing Elliot to share the parts of his past that still hurt. But late at night, in their tiny apartment above a noodle shop, Elliot would sometimes wake from nightmares, memories of Caleb's fists, his father's silence. Julian would hold him, whispering, "You're safe now. You're enough." And for the first time, Elliot started to believe it. Back in Spring Hollow, Caleb was spiraling. He'd always been the golden boy star quarterback, dependable son, the one who carried the Harper name with pride. But after that night, the night he'd let anger consume him, He couldn't look in the mirror without seeing a stranger. He'd fled to Nashville, chasing a job in construction, trying to outrun the guilt. He drank too much, worked too hard, and avoided his parents' calls. The memory of Elliot's blood on his hands haunted him, a ghost he couldn't shake. Years passed. Elliot and Julian built a life together in Seattle. They adopted a scruffy terrier named Poe, hosted dinner parties for their eclectic group of friends, and dreamed of opening an art gallery where Julian's paintings could shine. Elliot became a counselor at a local LGBTQ+ youth center, helping kids who reminded him of his younger self, scared, but searching for a place to belong. He was happy, or as close to it as he'd ever been. But the scar on his heart, the one shaped like his brother, never fully healed. In 2023, a letter arrived. It was postmarked from Nashville, the handwriting shaky but unmistakable. Caleb. Elliot's hands trembled as he opened it, Julian watching from across the kitchen table, his eyes full of quiet strength. The letter was brief, raw, and desperate. Caleb was married now, to a woman named Sarah. They had a son, Noah, just 4 years old. But Sarah was sick, terminal cancer, the doctors said. Caleb was drowning, not just in grief but in the fear of failing his son. He wrote of regret, of the shame that had eaten him alive for years. And then, the plea that stopped Elliot's heart: if I lose her, I can't raise Noah alone. You're the only one I trust. Please, Elliot. I'm begging you. Elliot set the letter down, his breath uneven. Julian reached for his hand, grounding him. You don't owe him anything, Julian said softly. But Elliot's mind was already racing, back to Spring Hollow, to the brother who'd broken him, to the boy he'd once loved more than anyone. Could he forgive Caleb? Could he step back into the past he'd fought so hard to leave behind? And what about Noah, a child caught in the wreckage of their family's mistakes? The decision wasn't easy. Elliot spent sleepless nights weighing his pain against the faint flicker of hope that Caleb's letter had ignited. He thought of his work at the youth center, of the kids who needed someone to fight for them. He thought of Julian, who'd shown him what love could be. And he thought of Noah, a boy he'd never met but already felt responsible for. In the end, it was Julian who tipped the scales. You're not doing this for Caleb, he said one night, his voice steady. You're doing it for that kid. And for you. Elliot called Caleb the next day. The conversation was stilted, heavy with years of silence. Caleb's voice cracked as he thanked him, over and over, promising to make things right. They agreed to meet in Nashville. Elliot and Julian packed their bags, Poe in tow, and drove across the country, the road stretching out like a question mark. What would they find when they got there? Redemption? Or just more pain? Nashville was a city of music and ghosts for Elliot. The skyline sparkled with glass and steel, but as they drove through its outskirts, the familiar weight of the South settled over him. Humid air, the twang of country music from passing cars, the ache of memories he'd buried. Julian squeezed his hand from the passenger seat, Poe snoring softly in the back. You've got this, Julian said, and Elliot nodded, though his stomach churned. Caleb's house was a modest ranch-style home in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved. When Caleb opened the door, Elliot barely recognized him. The broad-shouldered quarterback was gone, replaced by a man with tired eyes and a faint scar above his brow, a remnant of some bar fight or construction accident. Elliot guessed. Caleb's gaze flickered between Elliot and Julian, landing on their clasped hands. For a moment, Elliot braced for judgment, but Caleb just stepped aside. "Come in," he said, his voice rough. Inside, the house was warm but heavy with grief. Photos of Sarah lined the walls, her smile bright, her eyes kind. Noah, a small boy with Caleb's sandy hair and Sarah's curious gaze, peeked out from behind a couch. He clutched a stuffed dinosaur, his shyness melting Elliot's heart. "Hey, buddy," Elliot said softly, kneeling. Noah hesitated, then offered a tiny wave before darting to Caleb's side. Sarah was in the bedroom, a frail figure under a quilt. Her illness had stolen her strength, but not her warmth. She reached for Elliot's hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "Caleb told me everything. He's sorry, Elliot. He's been sorry for years." Elliot swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. He wanted to believe her, but the past was a heavy anchor. Over the next few days, Elliot and Julian settled into a guest room, trying to find a rhythm in this unfamiliar space. Caleb was awkward, tiptoeing around Elliot like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. They talked in fits and starts about Sarah, about Noah, about anything but the night that had torn them apart. Julian, ever the peacemaker, filled the silences with stories of Seattle, his paintings, and Poe's antics. Noah warmed to him quickly, giggling as Julian sketched cartoon dinosaurs on scrap paper. One evening, after Noah was asleep, Caleb asked Elliot to sit with him on the back porch. The air was thick with cicadas, the sky a deep indigo. Caleb held a beer, his hands fidgeting. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said finally, his voice low. "What I did, it was wrong. I was scared, angry, stupid. Dad's voice was in my head, telling me what a man's supposed to be. But I'm not that guy anymore." He looked at Elliot, his eyes pleading. "I need you to know I'm trying." Elliot's throat tightened. He wanted to scream, to demand why Caleb hadn't tried sooner, why it took a dying wife and a scared kid to make him see. But he saw the pain in Caleb's face, the weight of years spent hating himself. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," Elliot admitted. "But I'm here. For Noah." Caleb nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "That's more than I deserve." Life in Nashville became a delicate dance. Elliot and Julian took Noah to the park, taught him how to toss a frisbee, and read him bedtime stories. Sarah's condition worsened, and the house grew quieter, the air heavy with impending loss. Elliot found himself slipping into a role he hadn't expected: uncle, caretaker, bridge between a broken past and an uncertain future. Julian was his rock, always knowing when to crack a joke or pull him close. One night, Sarah called Elliot to her side. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes were clear. "Noah's going to need you," she said. "Caleb's a good man, but he's lost right now. You're stronger than you know, Elliot. You always have been." Her words hit like a tidal wave, stirring something deep within him. He realized he wasn't just here for Noah, he was here to reclaim a piece of himself. Sarah passed quietly in the night, a week after Elliot and Julian's arrival. The house felt hollow, like a song cut off mid-note. Noah didn't understand at first, asking why Mommy wasn't waking up. Caleb tried to explain, his voice breaking, but it was Elliot who sat with Noah, holding him as he cried, promising he'd never be alone. Julian watched from the doorway, his heart aching for them all. The funeral was small, held in a church Sarah had loved. Spring Hollow folks came, their faces a mix of sympathy and curiosity. Some whispered about Elliot, the gay brother who'd returned, but he held his head high, Julian's hand in his. Caleb stood apart, his grief a private storm, but he thanked every guest, his voice steady despite the cracks beneath. After the service, life settled into a fragile new normal. Caleb threw himself into work, leaving early and returning late, his eyes red from exhaustion or tears. Elliot and Julian took on Noah's care, driving him to preschool, packing his lunches, and helping with his dinosaur obsession. Noah was a bright spot, his laughter a reminder of why they stayed. But the tension between Elliot and Caleb lingered, a fault line waiting to crack. One afternoon, while Noah napped, Elliot found Caleb in the garage, tinkering with an old motorcycle. The air smelled of oil and metal, a familiar scent from their childhood when they'd watched their father fix cars. Elliot hesitated, then spoke. "You're avoiding me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If we're going to do this, raise Noah together, we need to talk. Really talk." Caleb set down his wrench, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know how," he admitted. "Every time I look at you, I see what I did. I see the kid I hurt, the brother I lost. I don't know how to fix it." Elliot's chest tightened, but he pressed on. "You start by being here. Not just for Noah, but for us. You owe me that much." The conversation that followed was raw, messy, and long overdue. Caleb spoke of their father's expectations, the pressure to be the perfect son, the fear that Elliot's truth would unravel their family. He'd lashed out, not just at Elliot but at his own confusion. Elliot listened, his anger softening into something sadder, more complex. He shared his own story, the fear, the loneliness, the life he'd built despite it all. For the first time, they saw each other, not as enemies, but as brothers shaped by the same broken mold. Julian helped keep them grounded. He cooked dinners, played mediator when tempers flared, and reminded Elliot to breathe. One night, as they lay in bed, Julian traced the scar on Elliot's cheek, a faint reminder of that awful night. "You're doing something incredible," Julian whispered. "You're giving Noah a family, and you're giving Caleb a chance to be better." Elliot nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "I just hope I'm enough." "You are," Julian said, kissing him softly. "You always have been." Months passed, and the Nashville house began to feel like home. Noah started calling Elliot Uncle L, a nickname that made his heart swell. Caleb was trying showing up for dinner, reading to Noah, even joining them for movie nights. He was clumsy at first, unsure how to navigate this new dynamic, but his efforts were real. Elliot saw glimpses of the brother he'd loved, the one who'd built forts with him and promised to always have his back. But healing wasn't linear. Some days, Elliot woke with anger clawing at his chest, memories of that night flashing like lightning. Caleb sensed it, keeping his distance, but Julian urged Elliot to keep talking, keep trying. "You're not just rebuilding a family," Julian said. You're rewriting your story. One evening, Noah's preschool teacher called. A boy had teased Noah about having two uncles, and Noah had come home upset, asking why his family was different. Elliot's heart sank, but he and Julian sat Noah down, explaining that families come in all shapes, and love is what matters. Caleb watched, silent but attentive, and later pulled Elliot aside. "You're good at this," he said. "Better than I'll ever be." "You're learning," Elliot replied. "That's enough for now." The turning point came unexpectedly. Caleb had been attending a support group for grieving spouses, something Sarah's hospice nurse had suggested. One night, he came home with a flyer for a local PFLAG meeting parents, families, and friends of lesbians and gays. "I thought, maybe we could go," Caleb said, his voice uncertain. "I want to understand. I want to be better." Elliot stared at the flyer, his emotions a tangled knot. Julian squeezed his shoulder, a silent encouragement. They went to the meeting together, a small room filled with parents, siblings, and allies. Caleb listened as people shared stories of acceptance and struggle, his face a mix of guilt and determination. When it was his turn to speak, he stood, his voice shaking. "I hurt my brother because I didn't understand him," he said. "I'm here because I want to make it right for him, for my son, for me." The room was quiet, but the nods and smiles were a balm. Elliot felt a weight lift, not all at once, but enough to breathe easier. They left the meeting closer, not just as brothers, but as allies in a shared mission to give Noah a life full of love. By the time Noah turned 5, the Nashville house was alive again. Elliot and Julian had decided to stay, at least for a while, splitting their time between Tennessee and Seattle. They turned the guest room into a studio for Julian, his paintings brightening the walls. Caleb had found a new rhythm, balancing work with fatherhood, leaning on Elliot and Julian when he faltered. They were a family not perfect, but real. One spring afternoon, they took Noah to a park, the same one where Caleb had once taught Elliot to throw a football. Noah ran ahead, chasing a butterfly, while the three men sat under an oak tree. Caleb pulled out a letter, one he'd written but never sent. "I started this years ago," he said, handing it to Elliot. "I was too scared to finish it then. But I'm not anymore." The letter was an apology, raw and unfiltered, for every punch, every word, every moment of silence. It spoke of Caleb's journey, his shame, his growth, his gratitude. "You didn't just save Noah," it read. "You saved me." Elliot's eyes blurred with tears as he read, and when he looked up, Caleb was crying too. They didn't hug, not yet, but the space between them felt smaller, softer. Julian, ever the heart of their trio, suggested a toast. They raised their water bottles, laughing at the absurdity of it, and drank to new beginnings. Noah ran back, plopping into Elliot's lap, babbling about the butterfly. "It's free now," Noah said, and Elliot smiled, feeling the truth of it in his bones. Years later, when Noah was a teenager, he'd ask about the scars on Elliot's heart, the ones that showed in quiet moments. Elliot would tell him the story not just of the pain, but of the love that grew from it. He'd tell Noah about Caleb, who'd learned to be a better man, about Julian, who'd held them all together, and about himself, who'd found the strength to forgive. Noah would grow up knowing that family isn't just blood, it's the people who choose to stay, to fight, to love. As the sun set over the park, Elliot looked at Caleb, Julian, and Noah. The past was still there, a shadow that would never fully fade. But it was no match for the light they'd built together. They were a family, stitched together by pain and redemption, and that was enough.